Remember in episode 5 when I said there was more to the story of Morgan Shepherd's DNQ in the 2004 Coca-Cola 600? Following an 11th place finish in the Nextel Open, word broke that Carter's Royal Dispos-all was also leaving. The rest of that story, involving company founder John Carter, will be featured in a later episode. It's now time for the rest. As if by divine retribution, they returned from the brink of extinction in even greater numbers. They aroused anger in some, admiration in others, but each knew 2004 was their chance to rise. They were the Field Fillers! Through the first few rounds of the 2004 NASCAR Nextel Cup season, Shepherd had sponsorship from Carter's Royal Dispos-all, a waste management firm based in Toccoa, Georgia. The last time Carter sponsored Shepherd's green Dodge was in the Nextel Open. There, Shepherd escaped the first lap pileup and finished 11th on a night that saw Dodge occupy 11 of the first 14 finishing positions. Days later, during qualifying for the 600, Shepherd was without sponsorship and failed to qualify after engine trouble in practice. His was one of 53 entries originally listed to attempt the 43-car field. One of his competitors was Todd Bodine, who after parting ways with Mach 1 Incorporated, but before signing with Don Arnold and Bob Germain, was driving for still another team. His number 37, a metallic blue Dodge with yellow trim, also missed the field for the 600. It signaled the first Nextel Cup attempt for a brand new field filler, and a late entry, in fact. This was R&J Racing, which stood for co-owners Roger Craven and the owner of Carter's Royal Dispos-all, John Carter. According to the broadcast, the team had just that Monday acquired Dodges from Chip Ganassi Racing, plus some Ernie Elliott engines, thanks to Carter's friendship with Elliott. All of this was prepared out of a shop co-owned by Frank Cece and Hall of Fame Buffalo Bills quarterback Jim Kelly. Cece and Kelly had originally acquired the shop in 2002 in anticipation of attempting the 2003 Daytona 500, but the deal fell through. Not only had Shepherd lost a sponsor, but that sponsor was now actively competing against him with the same cars and even Teddy Brown, a member of Shepherd's crew. According to Shepherd, this led to a legal battle that remains a sensitive issue to this day.
There was a qualifying broadcast that said that John Carter was starting a team running the number 37 and that they were somehow affiliated with you. I don't know if they had like extra cars, extra Dodges that they ran. Do you recall that relationship?
Oh, yes, I recall it. Yeah. It was my cars. And anyhow, he asked about sponsoring my car when I went to Vegas. And so he gave me some money. And anyway, did a lot of bad stuff with that. They stole my tractor color, my car, and everything.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. We had to go to court over it, and it was just a mess.
Goodness. Did you ever get your equipment back, or?
Oh, yeah, we got the equipment back, but he stole $452,000 from us. Yeah, that started with me, and then, just very dishonest person. Yeah, we got to it.
I wanted to get Carter's side of the story, but as of the release of this video, he has yet to respond to multiple requests for an interview. Todd Bodine also declined to comment on his time with the team. After Charlotte, Todd failed to qualify for the next race at Dover, where his R&J car proved a handful.
I drove this car for the first time at Lowe's Motor Speedway last week, and they actually missed the show.
Oh, you're hearing he took the throttle up, had to get right back out of it. Must be,
Got pretty loose right there. He was one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, a little treacherous down there in 1 and 2 right now.
He was 35th quickest in practice at a 23.18.
He's up out of the groove big time off of 4 here, and that car's a little bit on the evil side.
Yeah, I was going to say, Daryl, he's running a lot higher. Most guys are down there along the bottom in qualifying anyways.
I think he's just kind of chasing her around. Wherever she wants to go, he's going with it.
Yeah, like a lot of cars that picked up from practice, Todd's actually going to slow down about a 10th and a half, 24.30, 10th quickest.
Oh, man, that is a loose ride right there.
It sounds like that's what everybody is fighting right now, DW, as they go to qualify. They're fighting much looser than they were in practice.
He then broke through at Pocono, where he timed in an impressive 28th, his best starting spot in Cup since the previous fall at Rockingham, back when he was running full-time. Up until recently, Racing-reference.info had incorrectly listed Bodine's Pocono car as last start for Pontiac in Cup Series history. In reality, it was the same former Ganassi Dodge, which after 11 laps dropped out with overheating issues. At Michigan, Todd improved on his second timed lap, securing 38th on the grid. Much like his brother Jeff in the Larry Gunselman car, Todd nearly completed the entire race distance. He dropped out in the final 50 laps, citing a vibration that left him 36th. On June 24th, following the Michigan race, Todd parted ways with R&J. The team skipped Sears Point to look ahead to their first superspeedway attempt at Daytona. To this end, they looked to a rising star in a 24-year-old Chad Blunt. 2 years earlier, as a rookie in ARCA, the Indiana native scored 4 wins, 5 poles, and set new track records at both Atlanta and Chicagoland. Even this was only good enough for second in points behind a yet more dominant Frank Kimmel.
For the most part, we're happy, I just got to thank all the guys back at the shop, they're a super bunch of guys. They work day in, day night, and then at night, Todd Braun, my car owner there, and the Braun family, they're a super bunch of people. And look at the quarter panel here. We don't even have a sponsor, Maybe we can pick something up here. We ran pretty decent, but we just can't find it. I don't know. I think we're a front-running team, but I don't know.
I'd say you keep going toe-to-toe with Frank Kimmel, and someone's going to pick you up, you got to believe.
This first earned Blunt a Busch Series ride with Braun Racing for 2003. He finished 11th in his debut at Daytona, then 5th at Texas. Roger Penske came calling, signing him as a test driver to log laps at Kentucky, Nashville, and Greenville Pickens. This led to more Busch starts, with Wayne Jessel and Dave Carroll carrying sponsorship from returning Miller High Life. But in 2004, even an up-and-comer like Blunt couldn't escape the struggles facing veteran drivers. Prior to driving for R&J, Blunt had made just one Busch start all year, which came at Charlotte in May. Running a one-off for Hirschfield Motorsports, Blunt ran top 10 all day until a flat tire in the late stages put him in the wall, leaving him 34th. The R&J team took notice, and on July 1st announced he would attempt his first 2 Cup starts at Daytona and Chicagoland, running a new red Ganassi car that this time was prepared in the Braun Racing shop. Blunt failed to qualify for the Pepsi 400, then bounced back the next week at Chicagoland.
Chad Blunt, who has 4 ARCA Series wins from Walkerton, Indiana, 24 years old, has 19 Busch Series starts in 2003 and 1 this year. He's trying to make his first Cup race.
And Larry, going back to talking about scuffing those tires, from time to time, I think it's just a mental thing for a driver. Between us creatures,
he knows what that set of tires is going to feel like.
Exactly.
But you talked about Chad Blunt's ARCA starts in 2002. He sat on the pole and won this race. Pretty much almost led the entire race.
It was one of 4 wins he had that year. He was named Rookie of the Year, finished second in the points. And he's pretty much on a go or go home plan here. And 29.65. We'll see how that holds up for Chad.
Well, that was a pretty good pickup from where he was in practice. He was at a 30.41 in practice, so this team found right at the second.
This is a car that they bought from Chip Ganassi and Ernie Elliott. They build the motors for this race team as well. Owner John Carter, longtime friend of Ernie Elliott.
There are 2 teams here with no provisional starts available, no provisionals earned. Greg Sachs and Mike Bliss that have to race their way in. Up from that, it's Joe Hour's car with Kevin Lepage aboard, and then Chad Blunt. 3 cars will go home, so Chad's hoping that 29.65 will be enough to keep him in the show.
2 years after his track record run in ARCA, and with his Busch Series crew chief Todd Lowe's, Blunt ran top 15 in practice and put the R&J car 37th on the grid for his Cup Series debut. But the adventure lasted just 3 laps before he was behind the wall with electrical issues, leaving him in last place. Blunt would get another shot with Penske that fall at Talladega, but after engine trouble would make just 2 more Cup starts for Front Row Motorsports in 2006. As of this riding, Blunt hasn't competed in any of NASCAR's National Series since 2010. After skipping Loudon, the R&J team then hired Andy Hillenberg, was out of a ride after Hoover Motorsports withdrew from the June race at Michigan. In his debut, Hillenburg struggled around the Pocono track for more than 67 seconds. He improved 12 full seconds on his next lap, but still missed the show. Despite the disappointment, Hillenburg was able to shake down the car before the following week's Brickyard 400. 4 years after his grassroots effort qualified for the Indianapolis 500, Hillenburg looked to make the 400 for the first time, bringing Quality Equipment as his sponsor. He'd previously attempted the race just once before in 2001. Back then, in one of the first attempts for Beth Ann Morgenthau's team, BAM Racing, he'd been slowest overall. This time he hoped would be different.
Hillenburg, the owner and operator of the Fast Track driving school, one of the different driving schools where they let you take laps around a big track in a NASCAR type stock car. I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was, 2 maybe, that he came here. Andy is from Indiana, an Indiana native. His fates and fortunes took him from open wheel racing into stock cars, but he came here a couple of years ago with a shot to try and qualify for the Indianapolis 500, and he made the race, and the scene, the emotion on him making a race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was just terrific.
Yeah, I remember that. That was pretty cool. And the two Andy Hillenburg racers.
Yep.
One drives the stock cars. This is the Indiana Andy. We have the Oklahoma Andy.
Yep. Outlaw circuit. Yep. Andy Hillenburg's going to need to pick up some speed from practice if he's going to make this race at the Brickyard. And
not going to do it that first lap.
Not that way. 176.322 miles an hour for Indiana. Andy, 36 out of 38. And in practice, he was 48th out of 50. So this may be one of those where the story doesn't have a happy ending.
No, not like the Indy 500 you talked about just a moment ago.
Yeah. You know, some of these teams come here knowing the deck is stacked against them. They're coming with a team that doesn't have a major sponsor. They don't run all the races. They're trying to compete against the Hendrick Motorsports and the Everhams and the Roushes and the Yateses to get a spot in this race. But it's nice to see in some ways that the dream is still alive enough. People still believe in the dream that you can come here and give it your best attempt, and it just might happen.
It wasn't quite enough. Hillenburg was sent home in what became his final attempt at making a Cup Series race. Once again, the R&J team changed drivers, skipping Watkins Glen to focus on the return to Michigan. They brought on still another recurring figure from the series in Stanton Barrett, who after stepping away from WW Motorsports was rained out of a starting spot at Watkins Glen while driving for Rick Ware. The result was unfortunately the same, as qualifying was again canceled, leaving Barrett on the wrong side of an impressive 54-car entry list. In the final weeks before the inaugural chase for the Nextel Cup, R&J's number 37 had fielded cars for 4 different drivers in 9 races, but only made 3 of those starts. And in those starts, they had yet to finish a single one, with no finishes better than 36th. To make the next step, the team needed to find stability, and for that, they would need still another driver. Late in the 2003 NASCAR Winston Cup season, Kevin Lepage had just been rehired by Morgan McClure Motorsports. Yes, rehired. You may recall in the latest episodes of 500 Days that 6 races into the 2001 season, Lepage was first brought on by Morgan McClure to replace Robbie Gordon, right after Robbie stepped in for Bobby Hamilton. As you will see in a later episode of that series, that partnership didn't last the full season. Driver and team wouldn't join forces again until the 2003 Southern 500, when the Kodak car was now a Pontiac. By then, Lepage was already the 8th different driver to race the car that season, including, you guessed it, Brett Bodine. Lepage tells what happened.
There were some cars that I don't even know how both Robbie or Bobby drove those cars because the firewalls were so close to you that, I mean, it was so uncomfortable driving. I mean, your knees are basically hitting the steering wheel. And so, you know, we made a bunch of changes, and throughout that time period, there was some animosity going on between me and, the owners. They're not, I just say the owners, but the crew guys, they're like, he's wanting this, he wanting that. And, our results didn't show. So, before I knew it, I was released, and then I was hired back a year and a half later, and the first thing Jerry McClure said when he hired me back was our performance went down from when you were there, and we were on an uphill track when you were here the first time. We should have just kept you. We should have never fired you.
McClure kept Lepage on for 2004, only for the team to endure even more setbacks. Not only had Pontiac left the sport, forcing the team to switch back to Chevrolet, but more importantly, Kodak Film, which had sponsored the number 4 since June 15, 1986, scaled back almost completely. The company took their butterscotch paint scheme to rookie Brendan Gaughan at the Doug Bowell Penske Racing effort, and would be out of the sport entirely by 2008. The only Kodak logo remaining on Lepage's car was now on the rear deck lid of a red and white Chevrolet. But despite this adversity, the car was fast. Lepage ran in the top 10 during practice, and though a stiff wind seemed to slow him down, the first car on track for pole qualifying remained 6th fastest in the session.
All right, Kevin Lepage has completed the first lap of qualifying for the Daytona 500. First lap, 185.70 miles per hour.
And now, because they use the restricted engine packages here at Daytona to control speeds, it's the second lap. It's the one that's going to be the best lap for everyone. If it's not, something's gone horribly wrong for the car.
Believe it or not, they can't get these cars up to top speed in 2.5 miles. It takes 3-4 miles to get to that top speed. So the second lap is the lap that's going to be the best for all these cars.
And this car was pretty fast yesterday. I think those guys were real happy the way. I think they went up 6th fastest in the second practice. So this should be a pretty good run for Kevin.
And yesterday he ran, his speed was 47.77. Can he duplicate? Did he?
Not quite.
Now you guys got to remember this. A lot of these drivers talked about this win, and it is very, very important. That flag is blowing straight down that backstretch right now, and that is going to slow the cars down.
What's it like when you hit that backstretch with the wind directly in your face, Kevin?
Well, it's pretty disappointing, to come here for testing and then, 2 good days of practice here, and then get up this morning and see I'm guessing about 40-mile-an-hour winds in our face coming out of turn 2. But, my hat's off back for the guys at the engine shop. They built a great motor for this YokeTV.com Chevrolet Monte Carlo. I mean, what an off-season going in without a major sponsor. We're able to put it together. We come here being a top 10, both practices we had yesterday, and all we're looking for right now is a top 10 start here, as far as where we end up in qualifying. But it's about 250 RPMs we lost going down the back just compared to what we did down the straightaway. But we got a good little Monte Carlo here, so we'll see what happens next week.
70 got out, it cost him about 3 to 4 tenths of a second with the win. Matt?
But in the 125s, Lepage blew an engine, and in the race, damage from the big one left him 32nd. Things did seem to be looking up, at least in terms of sponsorship. At Daytona, they were backed by a new website called YokeTV.com. Yoke TV declared themselves the world's best web-based television station and planned to debut June 7, 2004. It's unlikely they were ever successful. This same advertisement is archived on July 29th of that year, long after the sponsor left just 4 races into the season.
I wasn't involved in any of the negotiations, but from what I was told throughout the period, especially as it started to go south, it was a smoke and mirrors deal. The guy was promising them the world. Kodak left. And, this guy came in and thought he could replace, Kodak and everything else. And it just ended up being, I don't even know if there was any money exchange. I knew maybe a little, but not to what, the deal was promised.
After the spring race at Bristol, the same race where he first replaced Robbie Gordon in 2001, Lepage parted ways with Morgan McClure for a second time. He'd be replaced the following round in Texas by Jimmy Spencer, who had just lost his own ride with the closing Ultra Motorsports after the loss of sponsor Sirius Satellite Radio. From there, Lepage put together whatever ride he could find.
So then, I started, getting phone calls from, these startup teams. And, the reason I was getting, these phone calls is because, I was known throughout the Cup Garage as a really good qualifier. So, when you got a new team coming into the sport, you needed to have somebody who wasn't afraid to step on the gas for 1 lap or 2 laps, depending on the racetrack, and get the car in the field. And then once, you're in the field, you take care of the equipment. So, that's that's where the opportunities, started coming for me back in those years.
At Charlotte, after driving Hermie Sadler's car in the Nextel Open, Lepage began a brief stay with Competitive Edge Motorsports, who we'll learn more about in the next episode of this series. There, he indeed did show strength in qualifying, putting the car in the show for the team's first 5 attempts. But after 4 DNQs in 5 races through July and August, Tony Raines took over for NASCAR's return to Bristol in the night race. Raines qualified, but so did Lepage, as this marked his first start for John Carter. When R&J's crew chief contacted Lepage, the two found they each had something the other needed. Not only did Lepage need a cup ride, but the team needed a new shop. During this phase of his career, Lepage still made several starts in what was then the NASCAR Busch Series. Bristol had been the scene of his second and most recent series victory in 1998, a moment that immediately followed his hiring at Roush Racing's Cup team. In 2000, Lepage returned to team ownership, bringing back the number 71, with which he'd first made a name for himself as driver of the Vermont Teddy Bear car. Now under the Matrix Motorsports banner, with co-ownership from crew chief Steve Plattenberger, the team set up shop at 107 Parr Drive in Huntersville. Today, the building is no longer a race shop and houses a branch of AdvantaClean, a water damage restoration company. But back then, the Matrix team first brought sponsorship from Redman Tobacco, which previously backed Lepage at Bruco Motorsports. Then came State Fair Corn Dogs, which stayed until a change in management.
And then we ended up picking State Fair Corn Dogs for a limited deal. And all of a sudden, we go to Vegas, and they had a new marketing lady come in, and she was African American, and she got up on her hauler, and she was talking to the brand guy who put the deal together, the marketing guy, and she asked him, she goes, how many African American race cars are racing today or this weekend in any of the divisions? And he said, there's none. And about a week later, we got a notification that they were terminating our contract within 30 days or 60 days or something like that.
The loss of sponsorship forced Lepage to shut down his Busch Series team, which in 2003 had even qualified for its first Cup Series race in the Coca-Cola 600. That weekend, he sent home Hermie Sadler, Derek Cope, and Brett Bodine. Lepage started 27th and finished 32nd when rain cut the race short. As it turned out, Lepage's shop was the perfect foundation for Carter, who rented space after bringing him on as driver. As a further cost-saving measure, the team would also use Lepage's transporter. This led to qualifying day for the Sharpie 500.
And so, I knew it was a solid lap, but I didn't think it was enough, so I went for that second lap and almost lost it down there in 3 and 4. I'd have been pretty embarrassed if we'd have had, if I didn't know what kind of lap we had in that first lap and then crashed on the second lap. So, we'll just see what happens. It's definitely, I think, a good lap for the way the track is right now.
Trying to hold on for his 6th straight front row start here in Thunder Valley.
How impressive is this? Kevin Lepage, 10th spot so far out of 20 cars.
But this doesn't surprise me at all. Kevin Lepage is a really, really good qualifier.
Talked with Kevin this morning. He was just hoping to get this car into the field. He knows it's an underfunded and under-equipped and under-financed team, one of these new operations that's looking to build. He said, if I can come out here and qualify well, I can show people what kind of job I can do.
He's in the race.
Yep,
he's in.
He squeezes a lot out of race cars, so it's good.
Not only did Lepage make the race, but he bested the team's best qualifying run to that point, securing 29th on the grid. Unfortunately, the night would end after just 11 laps due to a vibration, leaving them in last place once again. The R&J team was now starting parking regularly, though qualifying remained their biggest challenge. Lepage failed to qualify for the next 3 races at Fontana, Richmond, and Loudon before he arrived at Dover with another new paint scheme.
Next up is Kevin Lepage, 37 car. Kevin was 31st in practice earlier, excuse me.
Run a 17. Let's see if he can improve on that 23-17. All right, TNT Pace Chase as we check his progress against Michael Waltrip. So far, so good down in the corner.
Coming off 2 is when he lost a little bit of time.
had kind of a square entrance into turn one. It kind of looked like the car didn't want to turn for him.
Oh, man, he really had a square entrance there. The car didn't turn well, and he did lose some time up in 3 and 4.
And lap one for Lepage is 23.248, 5th out of 7 with another to go. How about 50 cars here to qualify?
That means that's good news. We have 50 cars. The bad news, 7 of them will not be racing on Sunday. They'll be watching TNT.
Lap 2 for Kevin Lepage.
And let's see, second lap, just a tick quicker. He ran 23.22.
So 5th out of 7 for Lepage.
The second lap proved decisive, locking him into the show. He turned 86 of the 400 laps before another vibration placed him 36th. He missed the show in Talladega, then after skipping Kansas faced another stiff challenge in Charlotte.
You're going to see some fast times tonight. It's a lot of fun. I'm having a good night so far.
Yeah, he said he could go for the twofer. He said, Larry Mack, he couldn't dig like he wanted to in turns 1 and 2. That's where the problem was.
No, when you're loose running around here at over 180-something miles per hour, those throttle springs start feeling like door springs underneath that throttle.
This is Kevin Lepage, the Carter's Royal Dispos-all Dodge.
Tell you what, a good lap for Kevin Lepage, 29.45. He was quick in practice. Kevin, this has been a type of racetrack he's always qualified with. This team bought this car from Ganassi Racing, plus they have Ernie Elliott horsepower under that hood.
And he was on the go or go home list toward the bottom in provisional points, so good run for Lepage. Looks like that should hold up and put him in the show.
Should be in good shape.
Again, Lepage had done it, ticking 27th on the grid. That race saw him run just 25 laps this time before ignition woes left him 39th. Despite losing an engine in practice, he made the next race at Martinsville as well, improving on his second lap to squeak into the 43rd and last spot on the grid. After 11 laps, it was the same story. He was in the garage in 42nd place. NASCAR tore down his engine in post-race inspection. Although Lepage failed to qualify for the final 2 races of the season at Darlington and Homestead, where he first ran a white Dodge, other races that fall showed a noticeable improvement in performance, and not just in qualifying, but in the races themselves. In the fall race at Atlanta, side of his lone Cup Series pole and the home track for John Carter, 60 drivers filled the preliminary entry list. Lepage went out 6th from last.
Kerry Earnhardt on the hot seat right now on the bubble. And Kerry is a go or go homer, so see what the 37, the Carter Racing Dodge, can do with Shelburne, Vermont's Kevin Lepage trying to run his 16th race of 2004. His only career pole came right here, driving for Jack Roush in 1999.
Halfway down the backstretch, headed off into turn 3. If you notice right here, looks like he's going to have a pretty good lap for Kevin. Has a good lap going if he can get off turn 4. Yes, sir. Good lap for this 37 team. 22nd quickest, and that will bump Kerry Earnhardt out of the field and home, put Scott Wimmer on the hot spot.
Half a second pickup. That's how important that, we talk about time all the time, guys. 2 or 3 tenths here, 2 or 3 tenths there. That's the difference between making this race and having to load up here in a little bit and go to the house.
As we said at the top of the show, we're going to have some pretty established teams getting pretty nervous down here as we get down into our final half dozen qualifiers, because 5 of the 6 are pretty strong runners to get in this show and already bumped to provisional land. Ricky Rudd, Michael Waltrip, and Terry Labonte.
He qualified 23rd on the starting grid, a new team best. In the race, the team lost 6 laps due to a mechanical issue, but this time returned to finish the 500-mile event under power. After 4 straight DNFs in his first starts with the team, Lepage took the checkers in 28th, also a team best. In fact, it was the first time R&J's number 37 had finished at all, besting their previous mark of 36th. Following the race, Dave Lawrence crowned Lepage his Underdog of the Week at Racing-reference.info. In the following round at Phoenix, Lepage picked up sponsorship from Rick Russell's Second Chance Race Parts, formerly of the Shelmerdine team, at Great Cars and Trucks of Glendale, Arizona, a dealership owned by Mark Schaefer. There, Lepage again qualified and even improved on his previous finish, rallying from 37th to finish 27th, the third car 1 lap down. To put this in comparison, consider Hermie Sadler's 26th place run at Martinsville, Derek Cope's 25th at Darlington, or Jeff Bodine's 28th at Michigan. Lepage achieved similar results, even though his team had far fewer starts or attempts than any of theirs. They also secured 45th in owner points, just ahead of Hoover Motorsports, which began its season 3 months earlier. I asked Lepage what led to this improvement.
I just think we got better cars. Once you buy some older cars, you don't know what's in it, what they selling you. They could tell you that it was a car that ran, top 10, but until you dissect it and found out that, when they were selling cars, they were taking good pieces off and putting bad pieces on it. And sometimes some of the pieces were bent. So, it took us a while to get the cars organized and put the good stuff in the cars.
But there was trouble ahead. In the fall Atlanta race, both Lepage and Tony Raines had made the show while 2 fully funded rookies were handed their first DNQ of the season. Scott Riggs in Valvoline Motorsports number 10 Valvoline Chevrolet, and Scott Wimmer in Bill Davis's number 22 Caterpillar Dodge. According to Lepage, both teams were so vocal in their frustration that it led to a rule change for 2005.
And these 2 team owners went to NASCAR and said, how are you going to allow a start and park team with nothing on the side of the car come in here and out-qualify us and then send a car like Caterpillar, who's been around for many, many years, sponsoring and Valvoline for many, many years. And so then, NASCAR formed the top 35 the following year. And when that came in, now you only have like 4 or 5 spots available. And so, when you had 6 or 8 Spark cars coming in to take 3 or 4 spots, the chances of you making a race every week was a lot harder. And that's when the ride started to fizzle out. We went to the racetrack with the same effort that all these other teams had. We had the same amount of tires, same engine program, same cars, just different drivers, different talent. And if your driver can't get in the show, then you need to fire your driver and get another driver in there. And that's what I was hoping for, that, these teams who are sending, big sponsors home, that they would look at me or like Tony Raines, who was a good qualifier, to come in there and replace these drivers. But it never happened. A lot of these young drivers were doing it for no money. They came in and said, hey, I'll drive you, for a small paycheck. And so these car owners were like, okay, no problem. We'll keep them in and, get in NASCAR's year. And so that's what they did. I just think that, at that time, that was the beginning of the, pay per seat rides that were coming in. The team owners were looking at, these younger drivers. Some of them were bringing sponsors. And, that's when, the veterans like myself, were shown the door, more or less. And, unfortunately, in my opinion, it's just my opinion. I think, the pay for rides and bringing your own sponsor, due to the fact that your granddaddy, owns a major company, or your daddy does, oil company or whatever, it took away from the sport. Being a young guy from Vermont trying to come down in the sport today, I never would have made it.
With the top 35 rule in place and another large entry list expected for the 2005 Daytona 500, Lepage and the R&J team both had their work cut out for them. No one would have expected what happened next. Over the offseason, the R&J team called for experienced fabricators and mechanics to join their team in preparation for the first attempt at a full season. Carter said, quote, after the end of the past season, and after having strong qualifying efforts in the last 8 races, I feel like we can be a top 10, top 15 race team in 2005 with the support of Billy Poindexter and the crew surrounding him, along with Dodge's support and our strong engine program by Ernie Elliott. We have talented, dedicated guys on the crew, and with all rule changes in 2005, I feel it will be an interesting year. With Kevin's experience, we have an advantage using his knowledge and using his finesse on the track to win races. As further incentive, Lepage said Carter promised to pay him an additional percentage of the purse if he finished in the top 10. By Christmas Eve 2004, the R&J team had 8 race cars in various degrees of preparation, including conversion to Dodge's new Charger body for 2005. Among these cars was a Dodge they acquired from Penske, a good race car, but one that always struggled in qualifying. The team fabricated a Charger body for it, painted it white, and on January 17, 2005, brought it to Daytona for the first day of the second test session. Lepage climbed aboard and quickly picked up speed. By the end of the test, they ranked 28th of the 54 entries, a critical boost since they ranked well outside the top 35 in owner points. "We had a productive test and we surpassed our goal," said Lepage. "We were fast and we will be able to show it again in February." Yet even a week later, the team still lacked a sponsor and ran the same white paint scheme they debuted the previous fall. They chose a bold number font so their car wouldn't be confused with the newly renumbered number 34 entry for Mach 1 Incorporated, blue numbers on the doors, and a pink one on the roof. Lepage qualified 43rd fastest, placing him 20th on the grid for Thursday's second qualifying race. The team then discovered the roof hatch had come loose, requiring additional repairs before the duels, which had just been extended from 125 miles to their current 150. Only then did a last-minute sponsor jump aboard, and this time it was thanks to a change by NASCAR. The sanctioning body had just that year allowed hard liquor sponsors into the sport, which brought Jack Daniels to Richard Childress and Crown Royal to Jack Roush. R&J's car for Lepage brought the first tequila brand with Patron. On Thursday, Lepage started 20th in his qualifier, but he wouldn't stay there for long.
Look at Kevin Lepage waving out the window to Martin Truex in the 1. Stay behind me, stay behind me. Matt Kenseth fighting back. Robbie Gordon in the 7. If he can get by Martin Truex in the 1, he'll make the Daytona 500. They're coming to the checkered flag. And that's his only shot.
It'll be close. He's going to have it. Well, no, Riggs is going to save the 1 car.
Stewart. Tony Stewart wins. Jeff Burton second. Kevin Lepage third. Martin Truex race his way.
With Kevin Lepage, who wiped a tear from his eye as he pulled to his stop here. You're in the Daytona 500. Have you ever driven harder?
No, sir, I haven't. I mean, I'm telling you, my hat's off to Roger Craven and John Carter for putting this deal together. Patron Tequila are coming on aboard, taking a chance with us today. We put the deal together last night about 6 o'clock with Active International. Billy Poindexter, all the guys in the pits, they've been working night and day trying to get this thing together. Came here, we knew we had an uphill battle, but I'm telling you, to race it in and race it to a top 3 finish in one of the 150s, I can't be any more proud of the Nerdy Elliott engines and the Dodge, the new Dodge. It was just an awesome race car for me today.
The incredible third-place finish in his duel placed him 8th on the grid for the Great American Race.
Kevin Lepage, the glass slipper broke. They lost a lap trying to push him, get him restarted. Now he finally fires and gets back in the race.
It appears they probably ran him out of fuel.
The miscue dropped Lepage off the lead lap, but with 31 to go, he earned the lucky dog, putting him back in the race. With 16 to go, he slowed in time to miss a 10-car pileup in turn 4. Then, on the ensuing restart, careened through the grass, narrowly missing another 8-car wreck. He had now climbed from 30th to 16th with just 5 laps to go.
I think it was probably one of the best handling cars that we had in a 500. It was just one of those really just, it was a dream car to drive. It never, especially at Daytona, it was just one of those cars that, like I said, it wouldn't qualify by itself, but man, I lost the draft after one pit stop, and it took me about 10 laps to pick the draft back up. And that car was just, as they would say in racing, that car would hunt, and it hunted really, really good.
6 cars have a chance to win it. Jeff Gordon's going to lead him into turn 4. They're 1 mile from home.
Tony Stewart just slid up the racetrack. He and Jimmy Johnson are going to make contact.
3 wide, they're bouncing off each other.
Jeff Gordon's going to win his 3rd Daytona 500. Kurt Busch, Dale Jr., and Scott Briggs completes a dream week with a 4th place finish.
On the final lap, and with drafting help from Elliott Sadler, Lepage caught the 3-wide pack off turn 4, banged doors with Carl Edwards, and shoved Mark Martin across the finish line. In those final 2.5 miles, Lepage jumped from 12th to finish 9th, his first Cup Series top 10 in 4 years. Prior to that day, Lepage had never finished better than 13th in the Great American Race, and that day in '99 saw him drive for Jack Roush. Now he not only improved on this, but did so with the underfunded R&J team. For the number 37 crew, it was their first lead lap finish and the team's best ever run, head and shoulders better than their previous mark of 27th in their most recent start at Phoenix. And they accomplished all this in the team's first ever start in the 500 after failing to qualify for the final 2 races of the 2004 season.
If we hadn't had that caution in the 500, I think there was a caution about 25 laps to go, we probably had a good chance of winning that thing because that car would just handle it, and we didn't have to lift as much as some of these other teams. And once we had that caution, we ended up going back green, and the cars were running 2x2, and they were just on that verge of tires falling off where they were going to end up. We could make it free wide going through the middle and stuff, but just never made it.
The team was just as elated, picking up $307,138 in purse money to go with the $33,188 earned in the duels. Lepage was ready to receive his bonus, but was soon disappointed.
And, after, all the celebrating and done, and, we get back home, I get my lousy $2,500 or $5,000, whatever it was to start. And I called him and I said, well, you told me that if I had a top 10 that you're going to give me a percentage of the purse. Well, there was nothing in writing and blah, blah, blah. So, that kind of the beginning of, the some of the animosity that was going on.
It was a return to reality the next week in Fontana, where the team presented a year-old Dodge Intrepid for the second race of the season. The car's interior fire extinguisher was confiscated by NASCAR for containing Halon 1211, which the sport had banned because it was classified as an ozone-depleting substance. That weekend, Lepage had just managed to secure the 43rd and last spot on the grid, and despite coming home under power, finished a distant 31st, 9 laps down. And while he continued to finish under power in his next 4 starts, finishing no worse than 32nd, he also failed to qualify for 5 races in between, dropping him to 38th in points heading into the May races in Charlotte. Patron signed for a few more of these big races, but not for Charlotte, which opened the door for the most appropriate sponsor of any field filler. While a live-action movie based on Underdog came out 2 years later, this car referenced the far superior cartoon, much to the joy of Darrell Waltrip.
It's not that Kevin is such an underdog. I mean, he is, but he really is sponsored by the Underdog cartoon.
Yes, sir. Last week and this week. Wonder if his crew chief is Rick Raff. Well, his wife may not be Sweet Polly Thoroughbred, but I know his wife Donna is up on top of the grandstand spotting for him. And that's purebred, not thoroughbred. Neil Goldberg corrects me in my ear. Purebred. Well, it's kind of like chameleon,
Just like at Daytona, it showed remarkable speed. Lepage qualified 7th on the grid for the Nextel Open, where he finished 19th in a field of 28.
Kevin Lepage with Underdog on the hood of his Dodge in 8 All-Star Opens with the best finish of 2nd in 2001.
Tell you what, he stepped it up here. Qualified first lap, 28.85, over 187 miles an hour.
Well, that's putting on the dog.
Yeah, that old piece right there was getting around there, buddy. Nothing unlucky about that dog.
He's always ran well here, though. Always qualified good, no matter what he was in.
Fair enough. He's made a few changes on his race team, too. Looks like it may have helped.
He'd perform even better in the following week's Coca-Cola 600, where Humpy Wheeler's levigated track surface would present the season's toughest test.
And Underdog is right there.
Had that great run at Daytona to start the season off, and it's been a little rough road since then, but making up for it tonight. 27 to go.
We had a solid race. I think we started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and with all the cautions and rain and the track coming apart, and we were losing tires, and because they had ground the racetrack. And fortunate for me, I was a driver that could sense when we had an issue. So when I felt the tires start to go apart, I would come right down pit road under green and save the car. And shortly thereafter, somebody else would blow a tire and take the car, take the field out, or a couple cars or whatever. And so we ended up late that night, but we had a good solid run.
Lepage finished 12th and on the lead lap, his best showing since the Daytona 500, and a fine debut for new crew chief Glenn Darrow. Now running a bright green car with returning Patron sponsorship with Michigan and Chicagoland, the team also welcomed new backing from online poker website bowspoker.net. During this stretch, Lepage finished 25th in his return to Daytona that July, but while seemingly on the right track, the business relationship between Lepage, Carter, and Craven continued to deteriorate.
Well, what happened was we had a partner involved in that deal, and the guy ended up screwing John. We had multiple sponsors that were coming aboard. One of them was, I think it was Solar Bat or some sponsor that was coming aboard. And his partner, went to the meeting with his Ray-Bans on, and he was a big partier, and there was a lot of animosity between them two. And so then eventually the teams stopped going to all the races, stopped putting the money forward. We had some crew chief changes, and replacement crew chief was stealing from them, stealing equipment. We'd get a set of brand new brakes that go to Richmond or Martinsville, and next thing you know, we'd go to the racetrack, we had brake failure, and the new stuff was never put on. It was gone out the back door and sold. What ended up happening is, I confronted both Roger and John about it. John Carter and I forget Roger's last name.
I think Roger Craven.
Yeah, Roger Craven.
Yeah.
And I confronted both of them about it. And I was like, look, dude, this stuff's going on, and this is running out of my shop. And I'm not going to be in the middle of people stealing stuff from you guys, and then all of a sudden it's coming back to me. So, you either got to fix the problem or, go down the road. Well, the acting crew chief at the time, he basically was in both of those guys' ears, more Roger Craven ear than John Carter, but they were in his ear because maybe Roger was getting some kickback on the side or what, I don't know, but they ended up saying, well, we're going to make a different program, we're going to replace you. And I'm like, if you're going to replace me, you need to take your stuff and leave the shop. So that's what we ended up doing. My dad raised me better than being the stealer.
After failing to qualify for the Brickyard 400, Lepage was out of a ride again, just a few weeks short of 1 full year with R&J. Carter moved his equipment out of Lepage's shop, and the two went their separate ways. After a one-off start by former PPI driver Anthony Lazzaro at Watkins Glen, the R&J team hired Tony Raines, who along with Lepage qualified for that fateful fall Atlanta race in 2004. Raines made his first start for the team at Michigan, where he qualified an impressive 15th, the team's best start since Lepage's 8th in the 500. And once again, the team would find themselves tantalizingly close to victory. Thanks to a 51-lap green flag run to the finish, fuel mileage would determine the winner. And with 7 laps to go, Raines took the lead.
Marty, how about Mayfield?
Hey guys, I found the gambling team that you've been looking for. It's the 19 bunch. They can make it all the way on fuel. They've topped off at 148, as you mentioned, Bill. And here in the test, they went 52 laps on a tank of fuel. Slugger Labby said, no way, we're stopping right now. Dave?
The word has gone out to Scott Riggs in the 10. Go get them. They said, you're third. We're going to try to make it. They topped off right before the last restart, and they will try to make it on fuel.
Mayfield is a contender in the chase for the Nextel Cup. Riggs and Raines are not.
Mayfield a little bit quicker right now. Actually, Scott Riggs was quicker than the first three. So this could be good.
Michael Waltrip in 4th position.
And Joe Nemechek 5th. Carl Edwards, who has been on pit road, came out in the 6th position.
Michael, but he's about 5 seconds back right now, almost 6 seconds back. He won't catch the leaders.
Oh, Tony's out of fuel in the 37 car. Alan?
Well, they told me, BP, that they were going to be a lap and a half short of fuel to the finish. They were going to try and stretch it and make it. They're about 6 laps short.
They're adding like you, AB.
Hey. And that moves Jeremy Mayfield to the point.
This turned out to be the winning pass, as Jeremy Mayfield scored the 5th and final win of his Cup career. With so few cars out of the race, Rains ended up a distant 31st. In the weeks ahead, Rains would earn a few more solid finishes. He finished on the lead lap at Fontana, taking home 28th, then ran 22nd at Talladega. But Rains too racked up 3 DNQs, opening the door for Jimmy Spencer, Mike Garvey, and Mike Skinner to take their turn in the car. In those final races, the team's performance plummeted, including back-to-back last-place runs at Atlanta and Texas that punctuated a streak of 5 straight DNFs. During that same fall, Lepage signed with Jeff Steck to drive the number 66 that had once been Hermie Sadler's team Score Motorsports. In the closing weeks of the season, he qualified 6th at Kansas, 17th at Charlotte, and 13th in Atlanta, continuing his prowess in qualifying. His 21st place finish in the Charlotte race was his best since the 600. This deal too was fraught with controversy.
He owned a bunch of fitness centers, Peak Fitness. We started off with the number 66 and then changed the number to 61. I'm not sure why. But unfortunately, what happened with that deal is Jeff was embezzling money from his own company. I mean, several hundred thousands of dollars, and then he had an affair, and I mean, he was taking his mail and throwing it away. I mean, it was just a bad situation, and he ended up getting out of the deal, and his manager took over the program, and that's why we changed the number to 61 and started the year with a good run in Daytona.
For a 3rd straight Daytona 500, Lepage arrived with a different underfunded team he joined late in the previous season. But unlike the previous 2, the team couldn't run the latest body style, using a Ford Taurus instead of the new Ford Fusion that debuted that year. What they did have was sponsorship, and a big one at that: Mountain Dew's Amp Energy drink. Lepage earned 15th on the grid for the 29-car field of the first Gatorade duel, and started to overheat as he fought for the final transfer spot. Chad Chaffin's blown tire on Front Row Motorsports number 92 forced the race into overtime, where Lepage stayed out on old tires with Mike Skinner and Derek Cope.
These cars are trying to race their way into the Daytona 500. Kevin Lepage in the 61.
Lepage got by Skinner that lap. Skinner on the high side there. And Derek Cope sneaking up on the bottom there. 74 car.
And Bill Elliott in the 36. Elliott is already locked into the field, but can take a position if he can catch Lepage or Skinner.
And all of a sudden, Lepage looks like his car is going away. He gets by Skinner, but here comes Skinner back, and Derek Cope right behind him.
Those guys trying to race their way into the Daytona 500.
Oh, look, Derek Cope's on the high side of Skinner.
Elliott
racing to the line, contact. And Skinner beats him to the line.
By a fender.
And so, for that 3rd straight year, Lepage qualified for the race, where he led a lap and finished in 25th. The team began the 2006 season with a $254,683 share of the purse and qualified for each of the first 5 races. But once again, the economics of the sport intervened.
We had Amp Energy drink, and Amp is a division of Dr. Pepper, who Dr. Pepper is owned by Coca-Cola, and all of a sudden, we had a solid run in Daytona and a couple other races we ran good. And next thing you know, we got a phone call that Amp was pulling out And I'm like, well, why? You know, aren't they happy? And they're like, well, Coke had a deal with Rick Hendrick, and Rick Hendrick wasn't happy that AMP was sponsoring another team besides their own team, and so either you drop Kevin Lepage or we're going to drop you. And so AMP, was told to pull off our car. Well, I think it was less than a month later they made the announcement that AMP Energy was going to Dale Jr. So what happened was Dale Jr. was looking for a sponsor, and Hendrick was having a hard time finding sponsors, and this was a ready-made sponsor because they're already in the Coke family. We were the first ones to bring them in, and again, I mean, they were a division of Coke, but they were their own entity, and they had their own marketing dollars and everything. But again, they were under the big umbrella, but not a single dime that was on our car came from Coca-Cola. It all came from the AMP brand, but again, Rick Hendrick, had more clout than us.
From there, the number 61 made just 15 more races with no finishes better than 28th, during which time it was absorbed into Front Row Motorsports. It was with this same team at Loudon in September that Chad Chaffin, the same driver who brought out the late race caution in the Gatorade duels, faced the biggest challenge of his young career. After another crash in practice destroyed the primary car, his crew was still working on the backup as the final two drivers took time. 5 crew members now had less than 5 minutes to push the car all the way to the front of the line.
Right now, the number 61 and Chad Chaffin, the guys, they're on the clock.
Well, they are, and it's a go or go home car. And right now, Stanton Barrett is really watching closely what this 61 car does, because Stanton Barrett is the car that's on the bubble right now of going or go home.
2.5 minutes left on the clock as these guys come up to the starting line for qualifying, and they're obviously have a little sense of urgency right now.
A lot
they got a ways to go.
Yes, they got a ways to go, and right now you talk about pressure. You got a car that hasn't been on a racetrack. The last time this driver was in a car like this, he was involved in an accident. So a lot of things, a lot of pressures. If he's able to pull this off of me, it's going to be a pretty superhuman effort.
What he's got to better is about a 30-10, which is what Stanton Barrett in the 30 car ran earlier. But just looking right now at our front row as it stands right now, Kevin Harvick, you mentioned it, JR, it would be his first Bud Pole of 2006. And I really thought, Jeff and I both talked about it, that 28.90 that Jeff Gordon laid down in the 24, that was a pretty solid lap. That was going to be a tough lap to beat. And Jeff Gordon, I keep mentioning this week in and week out, 54 career Bud Poles, but it's been 46 now, make that 47 races since the man sat on the Bud Pole going all the way back to Infineon in June of 05.
Very odd to think that, but also tells you how difficult the competition is, not only on Sunday, but also on Friday.
But I want to point out one thing, and Larry, you work with the man. We make a big thing to do about qualifying because there's some drivers that are excellent qualifiers. But Dale Earnhardt, for example, he wasn't known as a fast qualifier, but buddy, could he finish?
Well, and I think what Dale really was, I saw this so many times in practice, he was like a rhythm racer. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many racetracks we'd go to on a run. If you looked at lap 3, 4, or 5, I mean, that was the fastest lap the man would run simply because he had to get into that rhythm.
Got to get in that rhythm.
Hats off to this crew. Has Chad Chaffin on the line right now. That'll look a little worse for the wear, but boy, what an effort of that team.
It's a long push down this pit road here. It's a long pit road. And of course, they've had to get this backup car ready as well, so it wasn't like their work just started when they started pushing this car down pit road.
So no matter what happens to Chad Chaffin, definitely a valiant effort by this crew today to get the backup up there and ready to go. So it's probably pretty safe to say at this point that Kevin Harvick will be starting first. Yes, officials saying time to go.
Come on, we got to go.
Come on, we got to go.
The clock is running because, again, if they don't meet and roll off here when they tell them to go, they can say, time up, boys, you can't go. So he needed to roll that car based off what the NASCAR official was telling him, and now he's rolling off, trying to get a little heat in those tires.
And the thing about it, when you saw those guys right there on pit road, that's probably the entire crew full-time guys on this 61 car. He made the clock, Jeff, by 15 seconds.
15 seconds. And looking through the window over here at the NASCAR officials, they were looking and trying to be fair to the rest of the competitors. I mean, guys like Stanton Barrett, and particularly, it would not have been fair to them to give them any kind of extended time. There's a NASCAR rule of 5-minute clock, and once you exceed that, no matter if you're right there at the line, if you don't cross it in time and roll it out, hey, you don't get to go.
Chad is attempting to make his first Cup start here. He has 3 starts in the Craftsman Truck Series and 1 start in the Busch Series here at this track.
And my point about that crew right there, they probably have close to the number of people that other teams have in the garage area, even the top teams. But it's also, that's their group from the shop too, where these other major teams like Hendrick, Yates, Gibbs, they have probably another 40, 50 people per team back at the shop working on next week's car.
And they might be a little sore tomorrow after that push down pit road. That was using every muscle in their body to get that car up there.
Well, he needs to pick it up about 1/10.5, 30-22, Jeff, and I think that's definitely doable from what we've been seeing.
Right now, he's got a time going, Larry, that will get him up above Stanton Barrett, who is right now holding on to that 43rd position.
If he can just get off turn 4, I think he can definitely get in. I think he's going to be in with this second lap, Jeff. Yes, 29.72. Good for Chad Chapman, but good for that crew right there.
Good round of applause from the crowd, and very well deserved. Guys, you're a little tired, a little worse for the wear, but you made it in the show. Time to smile.
That is awesome. Those boys, proud for those guys.
Let's go to Dave, who is with our pole sitter.
You know, and I think that was probably kind of fun for Kevin. He wasn't sweating the pole, but kind of fun to see Chad make it in the show that way.
Well, I mean, to hear the crowd appreciate what these guys do week in and week out on all these race cars is really neat. So these are pretty educated fans up here in Loudon.
Chaffin made the show, bumping out Stanton Barrett. He'd finished Sunday's race under power, 7 laps down in 34th. Lepage made his last 2 Cup starts with front row the following year, again in the number 37, but also scored a staggering 25 DNQs. His last Cup attempt at Bristol in August of 2010 saw him reunite with Morgan McClure Motorsports for a 3rd time, but he missed the race in what became the team's final attempt. He closed out his NASCAR career in first trucks, then back to Xfinity, where he gained unfortunate notoriety for this incident at Talladega in 2008. He made his 350th and most recent series start at Dover on September 27, 2014. As for R&J Racing, they would never quite recapture the success of 2005. A perfect example was the same 2006 Daytona 500, where Lepage qualified the Jeff Steck entry. For that race, R&J again fielded a white Dodge and brought back Chad Blunt, who had come up just short of racing his way in during the second Gatorade duel. After that, the team qualified for just 4 of their remaining 13 attempts that season. 3 of the 4 starts came with Bill Elliott, who during the fuel mileage race at Kansas earned an overlooked 16th place finish. 3 DNQs were with Carl Long, who missed the cut at Darlington, Charlotte, and Michigan. Rebranded as E&M Motorsports and renumbered the number 08, it was this team which in 2007 gave Joe Nemechek a ride at Indianapolis after the collapse of Ginn Racing. Nemechek still missed the race, but with fan support got the car into the team's only race of the year at Michigan. Unfortunately, a crash on the backstretch still left him in last place. The team stayed into the Car of Tomorrow era, where they again attempted at least a partial campaign. Carl Long and Bernie Lamar continued to attempt races as they had late in the 2007 season, soon to be joined by Tony Raines. At first, the team ran sponsorship from Rhino's energy drink, but by May, the team acquired sponsorship from a company called Natural Styles, creator of the FUBAR all-natural drink. As with Rhinos, FUBAR had backed James Hilton in the ARCA series, so team member Jeff Droke discussed the option of running one of Hilton's old paint schemes. FUBAR, who insisted their initials stood for Fueled Up Beyond All Recognition, instead demanded the car be wrapped with digital camouflage like their product's bottles. The design was intentional, as the company claimed their product was, quote, developed for U.S. Special Forces and has been a staple for elite soldiers and athletes across the globe. Much like the RedneckJunk.com debacle, NASCAR didn't decline the sponsor at first, but later had them change their website from getfubar.com to drinkfubar.com. The sponsor didn't pay for the ARCA deal, and after 17 Cup races with 5 different drivers, the team again made just one race, Fontana in the fall, where Johnny Sauter bumped Tony Raines out of the field only to overheat and finish next to last. Mark Simo then joined the team in 2009, merging what had been his No Fear Racing team with Carter's E&M to form Carter Simo Motorsports. But now the team was again without sponsorship. Coming over from the No Fear effort, Boris Said qualified 9th on both road courses, but finished no better than 24th. The final stretch of the season saw Terry Labonte drive, concluding with one more fan-sponsored car for the Ford 400 at Homestead. Just before the start of the 2010 season, this car and the team's remaining assets were put up for auction. Yet while the team has closed, Carter's Royal Dispos-all is still in business today and has even been an occasional sponsor in NASCAR. Most recently, they backed Chad Fincham in the Xfinity Series races at both Atlanta and Pocono in 2020. That may complete the story of R&J Racing, but not Kevin Lepage, for in this same 2004 season, he drove for another startup team that was looking to make a name for itself.
In America, there exists a sport that is driven by the fans. They are why everyone works so hard, on the teams and at the tracks, in front of the grandstands and behind the scenes, to give the fans the greatest race possible. NASCAR fans deserve the best, starting from the high banks of Daytona, all the way to the shores of California, and at every race in between. NASCAR fans, you're the reason for our success. Thanks.